It is weather wagers time here another week. Feeling like summer here in central Pennsylvania. Maybe it feels warm where you are too. Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Tomaso alongside my good friend, Brett Thacker. Welcome, Brett.
Hi, everybody. Great to have you along. Dan, great to be chatting with you. And we've had some fine spring weather here in these parts, maybe not everywhere. But I will tell you this. We don't often get a chance to pat ourselves on the back when we make picks.
But we certainly like to when we can.
We do. And if any of you watched the Masters, first of all, just an outright spectacular broadcast from CBS and Jim Nantz. And what a tournament it was. Now, John Rahm pulling away at the end late. But Phil Mickelson coming in second?
Everybody laughed when I mentioned his name.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't laughing, was he?
No, he was not.
Maybe he got the last laugh.
And Tiger Woods, to some level, too. I mean, really showed up in the tournament. Obviously, his injuries and
limped to the end.
Fatigue set in.
Correct. And we talked about that in terms of Tiger getting older and with his injuries, the weather had a great role to play in that. But I want to go back, Dan, and I asked you to pull a clip.
I did.
Just to let everybody know how we nailed this forecast. Can we cue up what we said about the Masters last week?
Let's show the footage.
Okay, let's move on and talk Masters because it is a tradition unlike any other, and it is here. And we've got to talk about the weather first, and we've certainly had better weekends at Augusta.
Yeah, and keep in mind we've already talked about Atlanta's weather, so let me go back to this. Keep in mind the thunderstorm coverage here. Thursday, not as much. So I think opening day, okay.
And sneak it in. Yeah,
but
Friday's concerning.
That's the concerning part, Friday. And right now, this model kind of puts the front in between both Atlanta and Augusta. If that shifts a little farther to the east,
look out.
I'm not liking their chances. And again, I'll take this through Saturday morning. At least Saturday morning is damp
and cool.
And cooler.
Look at that.
Now, could the clouds clear a little bit faster? We see the temperature start to ramp up. But either way, the first 2 days are in the 80s. It may be cooler Saturday, and then we may open back up again Sunday.
Sounds good.
All right, so we are back here. You heard it there first. We talked about the forecast. We talked about the stubborn front. Now, did I expect trees to be knocked over in Augusta? Probably not.
No, that was a little scary, and we did mention the chance for some thunderstorms, but it also got a little gusty along that front, and of course, play was delayed both Friday and Saturday, as you had suggested in that clip.
Well, and what I was concerned about, it was the only active area of weather in the entire country, and it was right over the Braves series against the Padres. Now, that didn't get as much of an impact, but unfortunately, where that front stalled was right over Augusta. And so typically when we see a front this time of the year, there's a lot of lift. There's a lot of movement upwards. So if it gets stuck, oftentimes you can get hours worth of rain, even if it doesn't look all that impressive on radar. So that was the situation there. You heard it here first on Weather Wagers. That's what we're here for. We know outdoor sports events get affected by the weather.
100%. And that they are lucky, by the way, that they were able to, one of the things the Masters prides itself on, especially when it happens to fall on Easter weekend, to finishing up that magical walk-up 18 on Easter Sunday. And I have so many memories of watching that with my whole family gathered around for Easter. And we had a chance to do that again this year. My parents were down. We had a big brunch, and we got to come home and watch round 4. They were lucky they got it all in, especially with all of the delays. They were able to do it.
And we knew Sunday would be the day that would mostly be in the clear. And luckily it worked out that way, and they didn't have too many delays that it really pushed Sunday into Monday.
And Jim Nantz, of course, with that final call, Rahm wins the Masters Marathon, which it certainly was. What are your thoughts on Jim Nantz calling golf compared to Jim Nantz calling football?
He's just a voice. I mean, I
think he's better at golf.
I like him on CBS for football. I really do. Really? He might be my favorite.
Wow. I think he's almost too understated, though, for football, where some of the other play-by-play guys are a little more into it. We know he loves golf, but there's just something about that final moment on 18. Everybody kind of holds their breath and waits for the Nantz call. But I'm curious as to why you are a big fan of his when it comes to football.
Well, I think I don't need the excitement of the play-by-play person. I just don't. I know the game well enough. I know when the exciting moments happen. I don't need someone hyping it for me.
Are you kind of suggesting you're okay like with a sitcom without a laugh track? You'll laugh when you want to.
Well, in fact, I've had trouble watching shows with laugh tracks.
Interesting.
Because it's distracting to me. And, I love Seinfeld, but now watching it 10, 15 years later after the first time I saw it, it's kind of overwhelming to me that there's this fake noise in the background. Or Home Improvement's one of my all-time favorite shows, but the laugh track really bothers me.
Now, keep in mind, some of that is real because there is a studio audience at some of these shows. But I don't know. I like it. It's more of a comfort food to me. But your view of Nance is that it's okay to maybe be a little understated.
Right, because the Gus Johnsons of the world, even...
That's the other extreme.
Even to some extent, I'm trying to think of some baseball, Tom McCarthy. One of the reasons why I think I don't appreciate his calling of games is it's too up and down, it's too hypey to me. Like, I know the game well enough to not need that.
Let me give you an example of...
Now, maybe to the casual fan, you need that extra little oomph.
Well, I want the person calling the game to be as excited as I am. And it was funny because I think it was, it had to have been Easter weekend. My parents were in town, and my son and I were watching the Phillies. And it was whatever game where they came back late to win it.
The Saturday game.
It was the Saturday game, right? And was it Stott?
Stott with the game-winning single. Yep.
So...
Stott and Marsh that inning both had really good at-bats and good singles.
This is actually, though, taking us into our next topic, which is going to be Major League Baseball and a bit of the Phillies. But let's start there, because on that game on Easter weekend when the Phillies battled back and came back, who was it against? Was it the...
Well, it was the Diaz brother.
Yeah, but I mean...
the Reds.
It was the Reds, right?
Yep.
And they're not a great team, but the Phillies needed to take care of business. And when Stott hit that ball, my son jumped up off the couch, 8-year-old kid going crazy. The Phillies went crazy.
Yes.
And Tom McCarthy went crazy.
Yes, he did.
And the call fit the moment. And my dad was watching this, and he said, guys, it's a game in April. Like, you didn't win the World Series. What is this? And I said, you know what, Dad? Why the Phillies have connected to the audience recently is because every game should be like that. When you're playing in the major leagues, too many guys don't take it seriously. They take it for granted. They look like a bunch of little leaguers out there running around, happy. My son and I were jumping up and down. Yes, it was a game in April, but it matters. And I would rather see the players act like that, and I would rather hear our play-by-play announcer get hyped up and get excited like that than, again, the Al Michaels and Tony Dungy call from Thanksgiving or whenever that was. From the first round of the playoffs. Yeah, that was a little
too deadpan.
I want that excitement. It's sports. It's sports. You're allowed to be excited. And by the way, for years, and I love my dad, but he would say, gosh, it's too professional. Where's the fun? They were having fun.
Well, let's not confuse this. A game-winning moment is fine by me, but like the Chris Fowler scoop and score, middle of the third quarter, or whatever, those are the situations that get under my skin. Like
a little bit of fake excitement.
Right, fake excitement. And again, sometimes I think Tom McCarthy's guilty of this. I think sometimes Joe Buck is guilty of it too. Not every moment in the middle of a game is a do or die.
But I think Buck's gotten better.
It's part of the narrative. I will agree with that. But
I think Buck's gotten better over the years, and many people do over their careers, of letting the moment speak for itself.
Right.
And Buck certainly did that and has done that, in my opinion.
And Joe Davis, who we didn't know a whole lot about until the Phillies went on their run, I think he has a good feel for the moment.
Yeah, I like him. And he's really grown on me, too, calling some of the playoff games in the World Series for Fox.
Yes.
And now and the NFL, too.
And NFL.
So an interesting discussion there. Well, let's talk about Major League Baseball, because the Phillies reverse it now. They're going to be going to the Reds. So what we're doing here, especially for the early part of the Major League season, is because that's one of the main outdoor sports that is going on right now, is we want to give you a heads up and let you know what weekend series probably have the highest chance to be impacted by the weather. And this week, Dan did the research for this. And, the Phillies have to go to Cincinnati now and take on the Reds. But also the Midwest is going to have some issues. There's an upper-level low, Dan, that's moving up from the Gulf Coast, and there's a front coming in from the Rockies.
Yeah, so two separate systems. This actually isn't that unlike what we saw last weekend, where the Southeast is busy Friday and into Saturday with rain. That low kind of dies off as it moves up the Appalachian Mountains. We don't see a ton of rain into Pennsylvania, some showers, and we'll get into that in a moment, how that could affect things here locally in central PA. But moving into Saturday, then the front starts coming in west to east. So any series in the Great Lakes region, the Ohio Valley, that includes Cincinnati, we're keeping an eye on for potential rainouts. Now, rainout might be a little bit extreme, more like rain delays, I think.
Yeah, rain stoppages.
The other key thing to think about is, and it's hard to see in these models, but given the warmth, there could be some lightning involved. And sometimes lightning delays, it may never rain at the stadium, but they have to at least suspend game action for 30 minutes, then come back.
Yes, correct. So let's talk about which series you've highlighted. Of course, we know, as I said, the Phillies and the Reds are going to be part of that, but the White Sox are taking on the Orioles. They host them. And then how about the Giants going to Detroit?
Yeah, so Detroit kind of in the crosshairs there Saturday as the front comes through. Again, it's all timing. Maybe the game is early enough in this case that it helps out. Same thing goes for the Orioles White Sox. By the way, if you don't have cable packages, if you don't have access to the Apples and the Peacocks of the world that get you some of these weekend games, I did find out that the Giants Tigers is the freebie of the weekend. So if you're a baseball fan,
where at?
MLB.com.
Oh, okay. So they offer up a free game.
Yeah, they offer up a free game. It's kind of, trying to get you interested in their subscription, but there is a free game.
And, of course, Fox always has a big game, too.
Yes. So the Phillies, as you mentioned, take on the Reds. The Reds and Phillies are actually similar records right now, team-wise, both having some pitching issues, both having some offensive issues at times. But keep in mind, afternoon games, chances of thunderstorms in Cincinnati could make things a little bit interesting. And I say this because in baseball, you have to worry about the starters. And so if you have a starter go the first maybe 2 or 3 innings, and then all of a sudden there's a rain delay or a lightning delay, depending on the length of that delay, the starter may not come back out. And early in the season, we have seen starters not go as deep into the games, and the bullpens have already been busy.
Especially for the Phillies.
Yes. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind if you're playing the odds on these. Now, we didn't list the odds this week because we're looking far enough ahead that you can't see them. But as you mentioned before, it's always about, a run and a half difference?
About a run and a half difference. And, again, it comes out the day before based on injuries, weather, pitching matchups as set by the managers and things like that. So when we look at the actual zoomed-in image here, we're talking about the White Sox hosting the Orioles. We're talking about the Tigers hosting
Giants.
The Giants, and they have an outdoor stadium.
They do. So that's the other thing. You have to pick outdoor stadiums here. Cincinnati, by the way, even on Friday, could see a couple of showers. Now, I think those odds are relatively low, so that's why I didn't include it in the discussion. But definitely Saturday, you can kind of see the line of storms setting up there west of the Mississippi.
Now, these are afternoon games.
Yes.
They might be in that in-between zone. They
Right.
might be okay.
It might be okay, but Sunday is also very interesting, too, because the rain is more concentrated around the center of the low. So even though I didn't mention Sunday, it's a whole weekend series. Sunday could also be a little bit in jeopardy.
Correct, for all three, right?
All three, and it's going to be a colder one in Chicago, and this happens in April. The weather is not always cooperating for all these series. We've been fortunate so far. But our luck may run out a little bit here. And, I actually don't think a postponement would hurt the Phillies all that much right now. They need some pitching rest.
Well, let's pull us up here because I do want to talk about the Phillies. And, again, their woes continue, and I know you're going to push the narrative that all is well. But let's talk about a couple of things, and that would be the pitchers. We've gotten very few 6-inning starts out of our pitchers. The bullpen has been taxed. I got to tell you, I'm not loving the signs so far from our throwers. Your take on the issues with the pitching staff right now?
I will give you credit on one account.
Thank you.
Aaron Nola, the trends are not great right now. And some people chalk it up to the contract talk and distraction. Some people chalk it up to a long, deep season run last year. Perhaps he still hasn't fully recovered, which would be a shame if that's the case.
Pitch clock,
he seems to be struggling with. Now, his last start was better, but he continues to fall victim, as he has through much of his career, to this blow-up inning. And for the most part, the last 2 seasons before this one, he had solved some of those issues. What I want everyone to keep in mind, and this is the perspective I'm keeping on this, I would rather him peak in May, June, July, then peak early in April and blow out. And the Mets are the best example of this, that everyone's wound up about the Mets. They have some aging pitching, whether it's Scherzer, whether it's Verlander, who hasn't really gotten going yet on his rehab. If it's Scherzer, people are worried about, did he lose his stuff? It's not as crisp. He's also not getting as deep into games currently. And so to the same people that are saying about the Mets, it's a similar issue with the Phillies. Would you rather have these guys going at their best now or when it starts to really count?
Well, and so talk to me about the bullpen, too, because gave up one last night. Doesn't matter when you're listening to it, but it was, against the Marlins. It went into extra innings, and the Phillies blew it. And quite frankly, again, when you play a team like the Reds, you need to be able to sweep that. Now, I know the Phillies won that series, and now we're coming off, again, pretty dismal performances against the Marlins. I know they had the game where they scored a lot of runs. That's fine, but you're going to need to do that more than you're not, and quite frankly, they haven't done that more. The Marlins always play us tough, but nonetheless, you got to be able to beat the Fish. The Phillies can't get it done.
So here's a stat for you that might surprise you. Did you know the Phillies are second in the National League in hitting?
Well, it probably all came from that one game against the Marlins.
Well, they're hitting over 280 as a team, which is actually a very good figure. The problem is they're not stringing together the hits. They're putting runners on, but they're not getting the runners home. And so to combat some of the trends you're talking about with the losing and not scoring enough, at some point they're going to break through. And whether that Monday game was an example where it does all come together, to me, they are going to hit a stride here where those guys on base are going to make it home.
Let's give a shout-out to two players that are hitting really well, or at least just I don't have any stats. I'm just telling you what I see. Bryson Stott's
smacking the ball all over the place.
And Mr. Alec Bohm.
And honorable mention here, Brandon Marsh.
Yes, 100%.
Who my parents call gritty.
Yeah, if you can find him under the hair, he is hitting fantastic. I mean, these guys are coming up big. And again, it's what these guys have done. Now, Alec Bohm has hit some home runs, we know, but these are hitters that, to me, just, again, watching, you know more about baseball, you can correct me, they're not trying to swing for the fences
Correct.
all the time. They are getting singles when they just need a single. Brandon Marsh has gotten some triples. They're getting extra bases.
Hitting the ball down the line, hitting the ball in the gap.
Yeah, they're hitting the ball where they need to hit it just to get on base and score. So from that standpoint...
And they're running.
Those are good things. Those are all good things.
Yes.
But the negatives are still a little concerning to me.
Well, and one of the concerning things that needs to be cleaned up, and this is where I will be critical, is the base running. And some of that starts with the manager.
Yeah, they've missed a lot, and they're missing the coaching signals. Something seems off with that.
Yeah, it's attention to detail. And it's what it comes down to, as James Franklin likes to say, we didn't execute.
Yeah. A lot of coaches like to say that and then follow that up with maybe we should execute.
So, again, to qualm, your concerns a little bit.
I get worked up.
I know. But what I want to say is, again, you fix some of the base running issues, which they should be able to fix. You fix some of these issues with runners in scoring position, getting them home. These close losses turn into close wins. And you got a guy in the bullpen named Jose Alvarado who set the record for consecutive strikeouts in a Phillies season. Now, he gave up the home run. I understand that. But you have someone dominant out there. Gregory Soto is looking more dominant as the day goes on. Sir Anthony Dominguez has had a rough start to the season. I don't expect that to last. Craig Kimbrell looks pretty good right now.
He does. Yeah, he does.
And so there's a lot of positive things that could happen. Plus, you're starting to see the rehab process kick back into gear. Ranger Suarez throwing off a mound, may go for a rehab assignment soon. Supposedly Christopher Sanchez looked good in some of his bounce back rehab starts. So you get healthy. You get a few more bullets in the bullpen there. You also bring back a starter, and maybe Matt Strahm moves to the bullpen, who's also looked very good. Some of the pieces start to come together by May.
You've got to win the series you need to win, though, with some of these lesser
teams.
I
don't deny that.
We're going to move on now because I want to bring in Dave Shiner. We're going to move on to NFL draft storylines, and I'm going to ask each of you some questions here. This is how we're going to do this segment, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. The first is, the draft is, I believe, 2 weeks away. We are gearing up for that. We're going to have some special guests on about the draft. We're going to give you our opinions on it. It is an exciting time of year because, let's face it, baseball is fun, but it can get tedious and it can get boring, especially.
It's 162. Let's
correct.
Put it out what it is.
Long season.
Long
Marathon,
season.
not a sprint.
Yep.
Bingo.
And it's April.
Yeah.
However, the draft is a part of the NFL season now that is exciting for fans. So just a couple of questions for you two, whether you debate this or agree. I'm fascinated by it. Who's going to go number one? I mean, let's just start there, and it's fun to think about because it probably is going to be a quarterback, but maybe you guys disagree with that. Let's start with you, David.
Oh, man, that's tough because, I mean, for all intensive purposes, Bryce Young is the best player, I think.
Yep.
But we keep talking about his size. Now, I think he weighed in at 205, but that was a 205 not throwing. I believe his playing weight was just a hair over 180. And outside of Doug Flutie, I don't think there's any quarterback in the NFL. I mean, at least some of the smaller quarterbacks, your Russ Wilsons, they're thick. You know, you got this thick body, the baseball player's body. They can take it hit.
Get through a 17-game season.
Yeah, but the question mark is, are you willing to risk the number one pick on someone that looks like he should be the best, but if you miss on it, it's kind of your butt, right?
Well, I mean,
or when you could go with C.J. Stroud, who is the more prototypical quarterback and was pretty darn good last year too. You know, I mean that's the hardest part. But if I'm making that pick, I think Young is a talent you don't pass up on. But I'm also not giving him millions of dollars to prove me wrong.
Do you compare him at all to Tua?
No, because Tua's kind of thick too. He's smaller, but that's the thing. This guy is skinny. He's built like Deshaun Jackson, 5'10", 180. I mean, that is not a prototypical quarterback, but he makes all the throws. Now, the other thing you got to remember about these guys in college, they're playing. There's a handful of teams that are playing with elite talent compared to what they're going against.
Correct.
And it looks like some of these, I mean, even that Burrow season, he was just throwing to guys who were wide open all over the place. Now, Burrow obviously translated into the NFL pretty well, but he's also that big guy. I don't know if Young is, but I mean, I think I have to go with the talent.
His talent was recognized even at Ohio State.
Because if you pass on him and you're wrong, that could be a job ender too for you as a GM. If you're like, we went with Will Levis because he looks like the quarterback we want.
Okay, well, let's think about the team that's drafting first. And how are they? It's fun to get inside their mindset. How are they going to draft?
It's a very good question.
So, Dan, what do you think? Focus on that for a second. Think about who might be taken first based on what we know about the GM.
Well, I feel like C.J. Stroud is the guy, to be honest with you. I've thought that since he arrived at Ohio State, he's looked like the talent. Now, the talent always wasn't around him at Ohio State. Jackson Smith and Jigba didn't play much this season. Julian Fleming really wasn't the talent he was meant to be, at least this past year. So I think you put C.J. Stroud on a good team, which is obviously not picking first. To me, he could flourish. Now, Justin Fields is also an interesting case study that he has not taken off in Chicago.
He's a great runner, but guess what happened to him?
Yeah.
He got hurt.
And
he's a
even to some
more
level,
slender guy, too.
Jalen Hurts takes a lot of hits, and he's a thicker guy.
Yeah, it's a different story.
Do we think the Panthers GM is stable?
Well, what about the coach? No. What we know that Frank Reich likes those big quarterbacks.
Is he going to have a say?
I would hope if you're the new head coach, you get to pick who you're coaching as your starting quarterback.
That franchise has been so dysfunctional.
They're dysfunctional, though, and that's my point. I would hope so, too.
Yeah.
And I would also hope Frank knew that before he took the job. But it's
a
job.
Or did he just take a job, right?
Correct. It's a job. And
there's only 32 of them.
Correct. So I don't know. Could it even be a total wild card with this team? That's more my point, that if it was almost anybody else but the Panthers, I would say I would take C.J. Stroud. I think Bryce is going to go number one. So I'm splitting the difference, but I just don't know with the Panthers.
I wonder if this is going to be a year kind of like that Reggie Bush year, where everybody was like, oh, yeah, Reggie Bush is the best player in all of NCAA football, and then Mario Williams gets drafted as pretty much an unknown. I mean, he was known, but no one thought he was going to be the first pick, and that leaked out weeks before the draft that they're like, this is the guy, this is the guy. Does Frank and the Panthers go completely off book and go for some of these ridiculous, like pass rushers from Georgia? Because I've been heard that
could happen.
they're the best in the draft.
Listen, this is a league that just paid Daniel Jones an absurd amount of money. So,
well, not a league, but a team.
Yeah, but I mean,
and again, look at the GM there.
Well, but my point is, I think Daniel Jones would have gotten it on the free market too. Some team would have overpaid for it.
If you're a first-round pick, you always get that second chance. It's whether it's with the same team, and if you get the bag from them, where you find out.
I love this term, the bag. By the way,
bag. I know everybody's getting the bag now.
Can someone pass the bag over here?
Yeah, seriously, we can split it 3 ways,
well,
right?
Cam Newton had it
he did
at Auburn. Anyway,
it was a laptop.
I want to go to the 10th pick, which just happens to be the Eagles.
Supposedly, we'll see if it ends up being that way.
Well, okay, so that's my question. Let's just assume for a second it is.
Okay.
Who does Howie take?
Remind me of the name of the Georgia kid that got in trouble.
Yeah, Jalen Carter.
So,
and I by the way, we've got an interview coming up with one of the Eagles writers, and Jalen Carter has some off-field issues. You can certainly Google that, but many of you already know about that. And then I misspoke. He did fine at the combine,
it was the pro day.
But it was the pro day, Georgia's pro day, where he looked off, and perhaps that was some of these mounting troubles. Perhaps he is somebody that thinks he is good no matter what, and didn't need to put a lot of effort in. Does an NFL team take a flyer on him, and would it be the Eagles?
I say yes and yes. And the reason why I say that is because there is a need at that position, defensive tackle.
He's good.
He's good. He arguably was the best defensive player on that team, and we already have Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, who were also major pieces to the first national championship of the two that they have. And the Eagles have, let's face it, a track record of taking some risks.
So are you saying Howie is just going to be a Kirby Smart feeder system?
Well, I will say they have favored SEC talent. Which
Indeed.
is not the worst
usually
thing.
a good bet,
Right.
Yeah, look at our quarterback.
You talked about the level of competition.
Mm-hmm.
You know what it is for the most part in the SEC. It's about as minor league NFL as you can get.
So they say. For me, I think just looking in the SEC still, I think Brian Branch, the safety out of Alabama, makes the most sense to me. But we all know you're not supposed to draft for need. But this guy looks like a stud, and I think if you get any of these players from these 3 or 4 pedigree programs that we're talking about here, your SECs, your Ohio States, like even Penn State's had a good record recently. Michigan, obviously, these top 10 teams, I feel like you have less misses than you do.
What about? I agree with both of you. I mean, it's fun, right? It's fascinating.
And you never know until the day it happens. That's the best part.
I'm going to give you a guy that's talented that isn't in the SEC. Could be, and it doesn't really matter. Talent's talent. Forget about the conference. But what about Joey Porter Jr.? Why can't he be an Eagle?
But would he be that high, or is he going to be more in the second first-round pick spot?
I think he's trending. I think he's trending up.
I think he's been trending up too, and some of that obviously is the pedigree. But Slater to me is just a very interesting name to follow because I think he's going to fall, as we know, with the issues. And I don't know enough about the situation.
You talking about Carter?
Oh, Carter. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Carter. His slide, I think, works for the Eagles because they could even trade back and potentially get him. And so,
yeah, you're right. If some of these teams have those character questions,
right?
Not that they might in the NFL, but you don't know. You're right about that. So let's say now, okay, what if Howie does something odd, and I only say odd, but something that could benefit him in some of the middle rounds? Does he get rid of the 10th pick? Does he want to trade for 2 picks later on? What's the thinking here?
What I understand about what goes on in these situations is they have contingencies. So they see how the board's falling.
That's a big part.
And what if nobody's there they like?
Nobody's there they like, or there's a bunch of guys they like and they can trade back and still get someone they like.
That's where it's really going to be interesting. If we do have this run on quarterbacks where the 3 to 4 quarterbacks go in the top 10, that obviously pushes a lot of that other talent back.
Right.
Whether it be O-line, D-line guys, even Bijan Robinson, like everybody's all high on him right now. I mean, if you think you don't like what's there at 10? Maybe do you trade the 10th pick for some middle rounds and then go after someone like Bijan at 30? I don't know. Or do you flip the script and take the best available at 10 and then use pick 30 to supplement the later rounds? We know how he likes to wheel and deal that way. I'm still not completely sold he doesn't get rid of both first-round picks for either a veteran player or just a boatload of middle rounders or even maybe 2024 picks. Like something to just look at this team down the road, not an immediate need.
Now, the other thing that could happen is, too, he uses this rare opportunity with these 2 picks to bring in players that are, quote-unquote, cheaper to keep the balance sheet the way it should be so they can sign Jalen Hurts. I could see that happening, too, because, again, you don't have this opportunity to get guys on rookie deal contracts that keep your cap numbers low. It's fascinating. It truly is fascinating.
It's chess, right? It's a chess match.
And some are playing checkers.
And he is good at it. And the other possibility is, too, he could use the 10th pick to get one heck of a veteran guy, too.
Yeah, I mean, again, lots of things are possible. That is coming up in 2 weeks. David, thank you.
Unreal.
We love to talk about this stuff. Dan, I want to talk to you for a second about college football and their spring games.
What you got for me?
Well, Hugh Freeze this week, coach of Auburn.
Another friend of the program.
Well, we wish. He can come on when he wants. But he made the suggestion that the spring games are nice, but also, he's going shopping. He needs a quarterback. He's going to be going into the portal. But he also suggested that rather than playing your own team, why can't Auburn call up a UAB and play a scrimmage? Why can't Nick Saban and Alabama call up Troy and do a scrimmage with them? And a couple of days later, I think this had trickled over to Kirby Smart, and he said, "Sure, I'm in favor of that. Let's do it. Let's get a scrimmage together. Penn State Temple. Why not?" Now, I don't know if this is something that fans would care about. I don't know if this is something that teams would actually want to do. But your thoughts on going up to, for example, Happy Valley this weekend? We're going to give you the forecast coming up for that. It is Blue and White Weekend, an annual tradition. Penn State has typically done very well with attendance at its spring games. Your thoughts on actually playing a scrimmage rather than just trotting out another practice, essentially?
From the time I was a kid, I never understood how the NFL has a preseason and college does not. I've never understood it.
It's because they're student athletes, Dan.
Are they?
Well, they were.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's the case now. And I guess what I will say may not shock you is that if there is so much money now riding on these TV deals, so much NIL money, there needs to be at least a preseason game or 2 in August, late August, whatever it is.
Do a couple in the spring.
Right. Or the spring. The spring still doesn't make a ton of sense to me either, though, because it's so far removed from the regular season.
Well, and by the way, you know what else is weird? There's been a lot of teams that have had their spring game already. Some have it this weekend, some the following. The portal opens up.
Right. So what good is this actually doing now? Because it's not your full roster. So to me, what makes the most sense is you move the blue-white game to the fall. I know why it's where it is, because you get people up to Penn State in a time they wouldn't be coming up, and it's kind of a homecoming, and I really enjoy it.
It's a special weekend. I loved it.
And perhaps even bigger this year is Franklin feels like they have enough depth that they can actually play a full scrimmage rather than these set-up kind of practice routines that he would set up on the field.
Right.
But it's hard to believe that there really hasn't been a full scrimmage since before the sanctions.
Yeah,
for Penn State.
Yeah, it's wild.
And
then COVID got in the way, too.
So now he feels like there's enough depth. We can actually play a game that'll be beneficial. But I agree with this whole notion that I think they should play another team. They should actually scheme a little bit. They should, have to do something that's not so vanilla because...
Well, and you can play a team from a weaker league like Temple or Pitt.
Well, imagine this is a good year. You're going to get people wound up. I'm
just being honest.
I know. This is a good year to remind everybody, though. You could learn a lot about Drew Aller if he was facing somebody else other than his own team.
Correct. Now, by the way, that defense, pretty solid defense, but I wouldn't mind seeing him against somebody else, too.
Right. Yeah. Something he hasn't seen before.
I don't think it's a horrible idea.
I think it's a fantastic idea. And here's the other thing. If you want to improve the strength of schedule, everybody whines and complains about the strength of schedule, including me. why not have 2 warm-up games or a warm-up game ahead of that big first Week 1 matchup, the Ohio States and Notre Dames? Should you really be going cold into those games when they matter down the road?
Yeah, exactly. It's not a bad point. And again, the sport continues to evolve, so we will see that. Another thing about college football to bring up, the Pac-12. Their TV drama continues. They still don't have a deal. Now, something to keep in mind here, they are secure through this next football season with ESPN and Fox.
It still goes through that.
And their own Pac-12 network. But it's 24 we're looking at. So I think a lot of the networks are not in an uber rush to sign the Pac-12. But the Pac-12 needs a deal. The Big 12 got out ahead of them. The SEC deal starts in 24. The Big 10 deal starts this year with games moving over to the CBS, Fox, and NBC. So all of these other leagues are set to go. The ACC, whether they like it or not, they're set for like the next 40 years. But the latest rumblings from The Athletic, they had a report this week, Stuart Mandel and others from the college football portion of the website, that there is no deal yet. And despite the optimism from a few of the university presidents the last week that said a deal is imminent, no deal.
No deal.
And now they also had reports that they are talking with the CW. Now, the CW is an interesting player. Just as an aside, our parent company, Nexstar Broadcasting, bought the CW and is looking to get into more live sports. They just did the Live Golf deal. They showed an interest in at least chatting with the Pac-12. Now, I was listening to John Orand from the Sports Business Journal, and he said, I don't think this is going to happen. It was just a mere, it wasn't actually a negotiation or anything like that. It was just a mere, what do you think? What do you think? Just, offering another seat at the table. He said it's likely not going to happen. But what we also know is that the Pac-12 needs something. The CW does have an advantage. It's a broadcast network.
Well, I was going to say, it's available in every household.
It is. That matters. Now, there are some there is some speculation that ESPN still doesn't want to give this up, but the money isn't going to be there.
Interesting.
The conundrum here is, to me, you don't really have that many attractive teams in the league anymore.
And it could get worse if this doesn't get done.
Well, that's the issue. If this doesn't get done, I think the league is in jeopardy.
It could dissolve, yeah.
You only have about 3 teams. You've got Oregon, you've got Washington, and now, just because of the aura of his presence, Colorado with Deion Sanders. By the way, ESPN is only showing 1 spring game this year on its network. Do you know whose team? Do you know what team that is?
Is it Colorado?
It is Colorado.
Yep, the hype.
And they're not showing Alabama.
It's all Louis.
Yeah,
it's all Louis.
They're doing that. They're not showing Alabama. They're not showing anybody. They're showing Colorado. Okay, whose spring game is sold out, by the way.
That's
what does
unreal.
that tell you?
Yeah.
What does that tell you about that?
I mean, it's like the James Franklin effect. You get a cheerleader in there promoting the program, and someone with a reputation. All of a sudden, people wake up.
So that's the one issue that, what are the ratings for these games really going to be like? The other issue, though, that ESPN is coming up with is they love the Pac-12 after dark slot. They want to program that 10:30 slot. So if they give that up, they can at least get 1 million, maybe 2 million eyeballs on that. It's not a lot, but it's more than they're going to get with anything else. So it's like they need it, but they certainly don't want to overpay for something that doesn't have a lot of marquee names in it. So I think that's what the real holdup here is. And then if they don't pay top dollar for this, I don't know that there is going to be a Pac-12.
And this has been my kind of assumption from the get-go, that the Big Ten knew what they were doing in getting USC, UCLA to sign on.
Oh, 100%. Kevin Warren's legacy right there.
I think we could be looking at a mega conference of the Pac-12 just being absorbed into the Big Ten and the Big Ten just becoming king. I mean, that's been my assumption from the jump.
Well, I don't know if they're going to go to the Big Ten. I think they could. The Big 12 wants to poach.
They can poach, but they probably won't get the big hitters.
Well, they don't need them. They just need to get Colorado to come over,
right.
Arizona State, and all of a sudden, poof, the conference is gone. I think it's something interesting to watch now. They're talking again about maybe June or July. The deadline keeps backing up. These schools need a deal. Again, it's fascinating to watch.
Where does the athletic department's money come from? The football program and these TV deals. You can't understate how important this is. And, maybe the CW kind of sits back.
Yeah, will they bid? Or Apple or Amazon coming through. That's still
it's interesting
something else.
That they're not seem to be big players.
No, and there again, too, would the Pac-12 really want that? How many eyeballs are going to be on them if they go that route? That's another concern.
Well, and the mere fact, people may be laughing about the CW, but it is accessible.
100%. So we'll see how that plays out.
By the way, if the CW gets them, I know two, 3 guys here that could do some play-by-play work. Just saying.
We'll be there, even on the West Coast. Kevin Warren, that as you mentioned there, and as I said, his legacy is this TV deal.
Yeah,
it's huge. But the Big Ten has now named its new its new commissioner, and it is Tony Petitti. And this name really sort of came out of nowhere. An interesting thing about him is that he was part of ABC Sports and the original pusher of the BCS, and got that helped to get that launched with Roy Kramer, who was the former commissioner of the SEC. So he's been around college football. That may not have been known. I didn't know that until I started to look up some articles about Petitti. He's also been a part of Major League Baseball.
Right.
You may have heard his name.
And the TV portion of Major League Baseball. And by the way, Major League Baseball came up with the digital broadcast format that is now being used across all platforms.
Correct, and he's been part of video game companies. He's had his hands in many different industries, and that could be integral down the road.
Could there be a Big Ten video game at some point, since there's
EA Sports is coming back with that,
right?
But could he have some say in how these rights are distributed? All of that. The good news for him is he can. I don't want to say he can come in and put his feet up on the desk, but the TV deal is set for 7 years. He doesn't have to worry about that. But could he be integral in further expansion? Right? Mm-hmm. That's going to be an issue. Can he get all of the schools on the same page? What if he came up with something that would put a cap on NIL deals?
Sure.
What do you think? And we don't know much about him yet. His introductory press conference is in a couple of weeks at the end of April. What are your thoughts on this? Is not, again, a traditional hire, although, Dan, it seems to be the way that these conferences are going. This is a multi-faceted individual that has had his hands in many sports and many industries coming in to lead the Big Ten Conference.
Listen, if his name's Mark Emmert, I'm willing to listen.
I don't want Mark Emmert.
No, that's what I mean. We need someone dynamic. Kevin Warren, I know you had some qualms about him, at least initially, but I think
everybody did, yeah.
He certainly proved his worth and really set up the conference well.
Mm-hmm. But then he bolted, so.
But that's what a lot of these guys do. It's on to the next big challenge. Mm-hmm. And so this is another example of a guy that's relatively unknown, but could really help move things forward, and maybe in 2 or 3 years there's someone else. You just keep the innovation going. You can't stay stagnant.
Correct. No, you can't. I'm going to be fascinated to see what he does. What is his first move, and is he bold with it, or does he kind of sit back and say, we're okay for now?
All great points.
I think that's going to be.
There's opportunity because of the Pac-12 situation. There's opportunity because of the mega deal that they got for broadcast rights. I mean, who knows? What I don't think any of us can, with any certainty, say what the future of these conferences is going to look like.
No, and another thing he's going to be a part of is when these playoff rights come up for bidding, what is he going to have to say about that? And which networks are going to be favored and which may not be. So lots to look forward to. But Tony Petitti, his introductory press conference is coming up in a couple of weeks, and we're going to hear from him, and I think that's going to be fun.
I think that's going to be fun. I think Kevin Warren, not super impressive, but did impressive things. Does this guy win the press conference and become more of a dud? It's always the question.
Yeah, but there's lots to like about the resume.
Sure.
No doubt about it. Okay, for those of you heading up to Happy Valley this weekend, we want to give you the blue.
Can we get that roar, Mr. Shiner? There it is. He had it queued up.
Football's back in State College this weekend, as we mentioned. Dan, what is the forecast like? It is certainly iffy at best.
Well, I'm going to be nostalgic for a second. My freshman year, my first blue-white game as a student, it was sunny. It was 80 degrees, and it was hot in Beaver Stadium. Weather will be hot leading into this, but it does cool down some for Saturday. And the reason being is we get some of the leftover cloud cover coming up from the south with this disorganized low. The good news is the word I just said there, disorganized, because watch the blue here kind of move in southern parts of the mid-state first, and then it does encroach on State College, but it doesn't make a ton of headway. The mountains do kind of help shield State College in some way, shape, or form.
And 70, not bad.
And 70, likely low to mid-70s, and it all depends on how much sunshine breaks through. If the rain is not much of a factor and the clouds are a little bit thinner, it could be a very warm day. Now, I don't think it'll be 80 in full sun like that day. I will never forget my freshman year. I got really sunburned that day, unfortunately.
You?
Yeah, me. In a metal, that's pro tip here. Because of it being all metal,
yes,
you fry.
Yes,
in that
you
stadium
do.
On a sunny day.
The other thing to note here is a lot of people go up mainly for other activities, tailgating.
Extracurriculars, yes.
And just plan on at least some showers. It may not happen during the game, but again, you can kind of see them all around.
Yeah,
there.
this is textbook scattered showers or thunderstorms. Now, again, this is the view I'm thinking of when I think back to my freshman year. The blue
It is a gorgeous day. We're recording this on Thursday. It looks absolutely gorgeous.
This is a live view of Beaver Stadium. The big scoreboards, by the way, have the unrivaled branding up on it, so they're ready to go. Mostly cloudy, we'll call it. Temperatures upper 60s, low 70s, a stray shower during the game. Hoping, crossing my fingers, it doesn't turn into any type of lightning. It's possible, but we're going to call it showers for now. Hope for the best that they can get through this. I don't expect heavy rain, but the moment I say that, it takes one cell to blow that out of the water.
To put down a 20-minute downpour, and there's Franklin with the hood up and running around, wiping his glasses
off. And all the
off.
people we've talked to, whether it's our own Ali Barubi, the beat writers we've talked about, they might say, how about that weather podcast where they talk about weather? And here's a weather situation at Beaver Stadium.
And I have a buddy that goes up there every game, and I always need to give him a personal forecast, and I hear about it if it's off by a little bit. So just plan for a little rain, and we think a lot of the game is going to be okay. I'll get nostalgic with you for a second too.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Blue and White Weekend was always a special time. Believe it or not, I was in the esteemed Penn State Glee Club.
You were,
and that weekend was a big one because we would always put the concert on our yearly annual concert on Saturday night. So everybody would go to the Blue White game, and then believe it or not, yes, the Glee Club, we would pack the auditorium filled with folks and come out and do our repertoire. So that was nice because your parents would always come up, your grandparents. I met my wife on one of these weekends.
Blue White, baby.
It's just a magic. Everything's in bloom. The end is near.
Yep, the end of the semester's looming, although finals are looming then too at the same time.
Yeah, true. But there's a lot of happy memories from Penn State and that time of year. It is a special weekend for alumni, as all the spring games are. You've got your Alabama, your A-Day game, and even some of our rivals, the Ohio State spring game. It's a rite of passage, especially if you are a student.
If you are a student, I always looked more forward to the fall semester than I did the spring, simply because of football. And then at the end of spring, you get that little
treat.
taste.
Yes.
And that's why I was, as a student, I was still there at the beginning of the Franklin era. So I was disappointed as a student that it wasn't a true scrimmage.
Right. That's a little disappointing.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Dan, tell everybody where they can find us, too, and give a shout-out. We love, too, by the way. We've gotten many of you to check us out on the YouTube feed. If you're listening in your car, that's great. Where can people find us? And then we'll give a little tease, too, of next week.
Weatherwagers@gmail.com if you'd like to reach out. We are also always on Facebook, Meteorologist Brett Thacker, Meteorologist Dan Tomaso. We have at Brett Thack, ABC27, at Doppler Dan on Twitter. Instagram as well, the same handles. We'd love to hear from you. Mr. Shiner, let's pull you in. Where can we find you?
At Shinetastic17 on all media outlets except for Facebook.
Are you going up? I know you go to a lot of games.
Usually this is the weekend we have a lacrosse game for our Mid-Penn League, and we usually try to go to the Penn State lacrosse game and then do the blue-white. Unfortunately, everything didn't align this year. We're home this weekend. But, yeah, this has been like a tradition for our lacrosse boys for a while, where we play a game, we watch a game, then we go to the blue-white game, and then hit the creamery and everything, and then hopefully we make it home all right.
Again, memories, and it's always, like I say, a special weekend. So if you're headed up there again, take the rain gear just in case.
Yep.
We're hoping it's pretty nice. You can get us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. We hope you'll listen, subscribe, like, all of that jazz. And next week, we are going to try, I believe, and have a guest on to talk about the Bobby Petrino, Jimbo Fisher situation, which is still always fun. Vroom, vroom, to talk about.
I don't have that card, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I need to get that in there.
We're going to get that in there.
We need someone with a Harley.
Because
we could get Brett to do the vroom vroom.
Yeah, I want Dave. We need that by next week. Okay,
I'll see what I can do.
See what you can do, because that vroom vroom is going to be used throughout the season. I've said this before. I don't know if there's a more fascinating program, because if you think about this, Texas A&M finished in the top 5. They had the number 1 recruiting class in the country after that, and then fell flat on their face. Things got contentious with Jimbo Fisher and the fans and the media. They oddly, remember last year, beat Brian Kelly's LSU team, right?
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. They put everything together.
Gave Bama a run, too.
They did to the last play, although a lot of teams gave Bama a run last year, and they were able to pull it out. But that is a fair point. They have these pieces, and yet they were missing something in that offense. Jimbo brings in Bobby. I mean, this just literally riding into town on his hog. And now everybody's wondering, are these two going to be able to make it work? So
it could be a beautiful marriage. It could also be a nuclear explosion.
Boy, I want that on a T-shirt.
Yep.
So we're going to try to talk to somebody next week about all of that. It is a fun time of year, and then in 2 weeks our draft coverage continues, our draft special, just to chat about, as fans do, what we think is going to happen on the whole and with the Eagles. So that's going to be exciting. Gentlemen, great to see you. Great of all of you to listen. Dan, take us out for the week.
We are Weather Wagers. Again, where can you find us? All podcast platforms and at abc27.com. Thanks for listening, everyone. Like and subscribe. Have a great week. Enjoy the Phillies.